This video is harder than most because I want this one to be true. Since I'm trying to take YouTube seriously now, and in order to feed the almighty algorithm, I'm going to separate this video into parts. I'll re-edit and upload the full version when they're done. The legend of the Polybius arcade machine has prevailed for decades. It blends conspiracy with science fiction, science fact, historical and geographical accuracies, and culminates into a perfect and enduring urban legend that reflects the fears of the time. In 1981, a mysterious arcade cabinet, black, unmarked aside from the marquee, and a simple green joystick hit the Portland, Oregon scene. The game was called Polybius, and the gameplay was unlike any other. It is said to have been hypnotic. Players described it as a combination of fast-paced puzzles, flashing lights, and surreal, mind-bending graphics. According to the legend, the players who spent time with the machine experienced headaches, hallucinations, memory loss, and seizures. There are reports of men in black, government agents who follow black protocol rules, who would visit the cabinets, collect high-score data, but never collecting the coins. The rumors persisted that the agents were recording data on the players, studying their behavior, and testing forms of mind control. Many who played the game reported insomnia as well as hearing voices in their heads urging them to continue playing. Within a month of the arrival of the arcade cabinets, they vanished as quickly as they appeared. There was no trace of their existence, and the men in black stopped appearing. As the legend grew, extra details emerged, including the name of the company responsible for its creation. Perhaps because of the slow trickle of new information from time to time, legend and conspiracy theories started to overlap, with some people claiming the game's existence has been wiped from the minds of the collective, to the extent that it is believed by some that it was a covert government experiment enacted on the public without consent. Others believe it may have been an extension of the MKUltra project, focusing on mind control. No physical evidence of the arcade has ever surfaced. No ROMs, no hardware, no promotional material. If it did exist, it is all lost media. But every now and again there is a mention online of a possible ROM dump, link downstairs to the Tetris episode where I explain what that means, or even possible hardware found in the back rooms of a derelict arcade. It's a legend that persevered for literal decades, I guess. But there are people who claim they've actually played it. In fact, the legend of the Polybius arcade cabinet is so prevalent, even outside of Portland, Oregon, that it became part of our modern-day pop culture vernacular, being seen or referenced in numerous mainstream TV shows and movies since 1999. I mean, the list is pretty extensive. The Simpsons, The Goldbergs, The Angry Video Game Nerd, Loki, Black Mirror, The X-Files, the list goes on. 9 Inch Nails' music video for Less Than is entirely based on the Polybius legend. The legend has become a touchstone of modern-day gaming culture, so it's probably a hoax. But I am a firm believer that the most endearing stories and legends have an element of truth to them. Others have done their deep dives into determining whether or not the legend is true, but I think it might be more beneficial to determine if there's any basis in reality from a conceptual level. So we need to break this down, and as much as I hate making timelines, we gotta make a timeline. Before moving along too far, it's best to acknowledge retro bitch Kat Despira for her boots-on-the-ground research into this urban legend. My approach is a little different, but her existing research has been invaluable to me. 1981. Polybius arcade cabinets started to appear in Portland, Oregon. Best guess is November due to circumstantial evidence, but since that's over 40 years ago, let's give that a free pass. November 27th, 1981. 12-year-old Brian Mauro of Beaverton suffered stomach issues and disappeared after drinking too many Cokes during his 28-hour stint trying to break the asteroids record. If this is one of the origins of the story, we have the arcade, Malibu Grand Prix Corporation. Same date. 14-year-old Michael Lopez collapsed in the same arcade due to a migraine while playing Tempest with his friends. July 3rd, 1983. Stabbing deaths of 4 young employees during the robbery of a miniature racetrack and video game center. 1984. American producer and author Brian Dunning believes that the legend must have taken place before 1984, and that the legend influenced the plot of the film The Last Starfighter, in which a teenager is recruited by aliens who monitor him playing a covertly developed arcade game. The novel Arcade, written by Robert Max under the pen name Robert J. Rosenblum, is released. Unclear whether this is a product of the urban legend, if parts of the urban legend stem from this book, or if it's totally unrelated. February 8th, 1998. The first recorded incident of Polybius online from coinop.org. a ROM is mentioned. December 12th, 1999. X-Files episode referencing Polybius airs on Fox Networks. 2006. Stephen Roach alleges he was the person behind the game, but provides no evidence. 2017. Llamasoft releases a shoot-'em-up titled Polybius, loosely based on the urban legend and inspired by games like TXK. Freedom of Information request for Polybius to the FBI. No results. I mean, the answer? Yeah. The timeline makes sense. There may be some room in the timeline for some interpretation, but it does work out chronologically. There's more factors than we as researchers even tend to investigate, and the toughest part with Polybius is if we choose to take any part of this as a factual story, we have to make assumptions. Namely, since there's no recorded mention of Polybius before 1998, we have to assume that the incidents at the Malibu Grand Prix Corporation are indeed one of the main contributing factors in the development of the story, as that seems to be the only traceable incident. Without that assumption, literally every other point of discussion simply becomes hearsay. We could also assume it was a different incident altogether that brought the notion of a government-surveilled arcade machine into the life of the collective psyche of the masses, but then the dates start to get a little looser. Are we sure it was 1981? Maybe 1983 when Cube Quest came out. Those visuals are trippy, and they also fit the Tempest narrative so often spun. I mean, I guess the other option is we could believe wholeheartedly the entire story without question. That doesn't feel like the best option though. People's minds are notoriously bad for recalling instances from the past, and since the story first emerged in 1998 and references 1981, I'm not so sure how much I'm going to believe the original narrative. And I'm sorry, but we do have to talk about this. It's too good for me not to mention. In my attempts to bring something mildly entertaining and somewhat insightful, while at the same time starting to take the YouTube rules and regulations as seriously as I need to in order to actually get monetized at some point, I've been exploring different avenues to speed up the creative process. One of which has been a small incorporation of AI-generated videos. Look at this clip. This guy wants to get the data from the Polybius cabinet so badly he chooses to phase right through the player and the cabinet. Our boy over here decides he's the bloody invisible man right around here. Carbon Cody doesn't give a f***, he's just gonna replicate and move on with his day. And God knows what these guys are doing, but they get my seal of approval. Anyways, so if we suspect that the base origins of the legend are from two separate incidents in Portland, Oregon, let's talk a little bit about the cultural significance of arcades in the 1980s, because they were huge. I'll pull from my own first-hand experience with arcades from the 80s. By the time I was born, the golden age of arcade culture was already in full swing, and when I was old enough to go to the arcades with my older family friends, that culture was fully established. For us, it was a safe place, young and old alike together, fighting for high scores in a dingy, smoke-filled neon dungeon of overstimulation and excess. Older kids would help the younger ones understand the particulars of a game. It didn't matter if you were a punk or a skinhead or a nerd or anything in between, the arcades were safe. However, as with anything that people don't understand, there was fear involved. So how can I say that there are fears associated with arcades when my description is basically a young person's safety paradise? Well, sometimes people don't like what they don't understand. This part basically boils down to the media coverage and perception. As long as I've been around, media coverage tends to be pretty polarizing. It's either this or that. The logical fallacies involved, right? I mean, look at how stupid this sentence is. Is it somehow more valuable to learn Missile Command than to learn English? It's intentionally polarizing, designed to make the reader fear that the advent of this new medium, the basic rights of English communication, could be taken away somehow. Okay, so that's just an example of how the media twists information. But what were the actual worries of the time?
Well, they come as if from outer space in a variety of weird guises. Defender, Pac-Man, asteroids. To fans, they represent a challenge. But to critics, as Terry Drinkwater reports, they are a menace.
Pit yourself against the computer. Millions, mostly teenagers, have. So many, in fact, that psychologists are beginning to worry that some youths are becoming spaced out on the space games. Long hours at the screens, psychologists say, can lead to extreme introversion. Youngsters communicating in a video fantasy land and not with their peers or parents.
It's not addictive in the sense of a drug dependency where you're going to have withdrawal symptoms, but it is physically, you can become physically dependent upon it because you get an arousal and then a relaxation response. It's the same as a roller coaster or gambling or playing cards intensely.
Psychologists remind us every younger generation has to have something to scare adults. Right now, all of this is certainly it.
And this is the most sensible place to cut the video for now. The script wasn't written with segmentation in mind, but I'll pick up here in part 2. Part 2 will be released in about 2 weeks.